Well, hello and welcome to the Lending Podcast. We are your hosts from Austin, Texas. This is the infamous JB, the guru of mortgage, and my name is Jeff Jones. We are talking about brass tacks
Brass
today.
tacks.
Brass tacks about what it means when you are giving a credit on a listing of a property, or if you're looking to buy a property and you're asking for concessions.
Yeah.
So,
We're going to dissect the benefit of taking the seller concessions in cash from the seller versus a price reduction.
yeah,
And how does that affect your payment?
Right.
Which one's better? And of course, it's situational. There are some reasons to negotiate the lowest price you can. Of course, we want to pay the lowest price we can for things. Everyone wants to negotiate the best deal. However, price and affordability and monthly payment is so critical right now for our buyers that we want to share some examples of some tools that you can use in your toolbox to get the lowest payment and the lowest interest rates out there.
yeah, and I'm very excited about this topic because we always want to do right by our borrowers, right? And one of the biggest things we can do is show you how to save money. And a lot of people, when they're negotiating a sale of a home, are only concerned about the price and
That's right.
the costs that can come back to them. Now, when you are doing those negotiations, whether you're a realtor to realtor conversation, or if you're a borrower getting presented with, hey, the house has roof issues, or hey, it's got an electrical panel that's got to get replaced, or hey, it's got carpet we got to rip up, or the inspection found this and that and otherwise, and you're doing those negotiations, or it's an upfront, a concession a seller concession can go much further for you than a price reduction when it comes to keeping your money.
That's right.
And we got an example we'd like to walk people
Yeah,
through.
we've got an example. And before I dive into the specific example, let me touch on certain loan programs have limits as to how much a seller can pay. And we've touched on this, I think, before. But let's take a traditional conventional loan. You're putting 5% down. Let's say the maximum that the seller can contribute in that example is 3%. Now, the same sales price on an FHA loan where you're putting 3.5 or 5% down, 3.5 is the minimum down for FHA, down payment wise. Seller can pay 6%. So there's more seller concessions, if you will, available on an FHA loan in that example versus a conventional loan. Now, the more down payment you put on a conventional, the higher those seller concessions go. And there's a grid, there's a matrix of all the different loan programs and seller concessions. We won't get into the specifics,
Right.
but as an example, VA will allow 4% seller concessions plus some buy down of the interest rate, which we're going to talk about. So conventional is 3%, FHA 6%, VA is 4%, but they all have some different nuances with those programs. Those are kind of the traditional numbers.
Yeah.
So we did an example of a $500,000 purchase price on a conventional loan, putting 5% down. Okay, so 25,000 down. Now, the discussion that we had was if we're going to take money from the seller in the form of seller concessions, we call them seller paid closing costs, and this is written into the contract that your real estate agent will help you with and will be a resource for you as well in that process. Do we take the money from the seller as a seller concession, or do we reduce the price? And so let's show you some numbers here because it is kind of mind-blowing how much it'll affect your monthly payment if we use the seller concessions to buy down the interest rate. And we're talking about permanent buy downs today, which means it's a one-time upfront cost that we're getting from the seller to permanently buy the interest rate down. It's that lower rate for the life of the loan. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be a temporary. There are temporary buy downs as well. We're talking about permanent buy downs. So here's the math. Yeah.
Before we go there, I like defining some things for people that haven't seen what a rate sheet looks like. So when a lender looks at pricing a loan, we have a software that shows us for your exact file. Mm-hmm. We're looking at all the factors that go into your risk, your credit score, your debt to income, your assets, everything that goes into it. There's about 60 plus different factors to get to your rate. We find your exact rate that's available for you today at this timestamp. Then on that, we see an entire sheet of options, right? So they'll go all the way down to 4.25 costing 14 points, all the way up to like 8.625, giving you a credit back. And everything in between. So we get this laundry list of options that are for you, your exact scenario for today. And so a lot of times you and I will actually share a screen with our borrowers when we're locking our rate and going, which of these feels better for you? I feel like this is the best value point is right here for you. Are you comfortable with that? What are your concerns? And then we have the buyer pick the rate with us.
That's right.
And so that's how you and I like to operate, is giving full transparency on that rate sheet. But so on that rate sheet, what we're talking about is, hey, here is kind of a par rate or one cost rate. This is a good rate. But now that you have more funds available, let's get you a better rate so that we lower your monthly payment.
That's right.
Right. So,
and yeah, no, that's perfect. And the example that we used, if you took $15,000 from the seller, so 3%, $500,000 purchase price, don't reduce the price, but take the cash from the seller, keep the sales price at $500,000. How much will that $15,000 buy you in interest rate? How much will it lower your interest rate, and how much will your payment go down? And the answer is about $300 a month on your payment, and it lowers the rate about 1%. So instead of 7%, you're at 6%.
Right.
And that's not for the first year. That's for the life of the loan.
Yeah.
So if you had this home, let's say you have the house 10 years, that is $300 a month, $3,600 a year times 10 years, $36,000.
Okay. So instead of taking a $15,000 price reduction, I'm just going to reiterate.
Yep.
So instead of reducing the price by $15,000, you're getting that $15,000 as a seller concession.
That's right.
And the difference in your monthly payment between those two, because you're getting a better rate, is $300 a month.
That's right.
So if you own the house for more than 10 years with that and never refinance, you're actually saving $36,000 by getting a $15,000 credit instead of a $15,000 price reduction.
That's right. That's right.
So that's pretty sweet.
It is. And you can also take that monthly savings, put it back towards the mortgage if you choose. There's a lot of calculators out there that will show you how much quicker you'll pay the house off if you make just one extra payment per year.
Right.
So basically 13 payments a year instead of 12, and you can break that up. And that basically would allow for that extra $300 a month if you wanted to put it back towards the principal, or fund your 401k with it, or put it in a college retirement fund. Whatever you want to do with that savings, you can do it. It's a car payment for a lot of folks, $300 a month. So I think the takeaway here is we're negotiating on price a lot of times. Yes, totally understand that. However, if payment is your top priority over, let's say, the exact price that you're paying, using those seller concessions, using that seller paid closing cost money to buy the interest rate down will lower your payment. You'll pay less over time.
Yeah.
Even though you paid more for the house.
Yeah.
You pay less over time, which is crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. And this concept, doesn't make sense a lot of times for people because the math is tricky, right? Because you're comparing two different financial calculators to each other, right? But that's why you have loan specialists. And for all of our realtor friends out there, shout out, hey realtors, if you have a listing that is sitting for a while and you're about to do a price reduction, consult your favorite loan specialist, maybe that's us if you're in Austin, and say, hey, if I advertise Seller Concessions, can you provide me a worksheet, for my open houses that'll show the price difference per month that they're going to pay? And so basically what you're doing is, instead of reducing the price, you're advertising a savings that they're going to get, and the math we just spoke out, if you have a $500,000 home and, instead of a price reduction of $15,000, you're offering a $15,000 seller concession, that's going to save your borrower $300 a month.
Indefinitely.
And that is a huge motivator for somebody to buy that house compared to just maybe $15,000 price reduction.
Sure. And then you've got this lower rate to start off with. We believe in the future rates will change, right? We might see some lower rates, but if you're starting, let's say your interest rate 6% permanently for the life of the loan in a 7% interest rate environment, when rates go to 6, which they may do, you're not going to refinance necessarily. You've already got a 6% rate, but that lower interest rate is going to spur the activity. It's going to increase your property value, and you've bought the home with the lower interest rate that you may keep indefinitely. I mean, you may have a chance to refinance at some point, but rates would probably have to get to 5.5 or 5 for you to refinance a 6% rate in most cases. There are some exceptions, but you're already in the home at that lower payment. So that's really what we're talking about, is just looking at it through a different lens, looking at it with a different strategy, using all the pieces on the table as tools to help you achieve your payment goals. And payment and affordability is so critical right now. This, of course, works at every price point. It works at $750. It works at $250. The numbers are a little different, but it works across the board using 3% from the seller. And we're seeing that right now because we are in more of a buyer's market than we have been in years past. Are we full on buyer's market? Not necessarily. I was just telling Jeff recently that most of the contracts we're getting in are still multiple offers. We're seeing a lot of activity on certain homes. Other homes are sitting and there's value out there. Certain neighborhoods are moving quicker. So it's an interesting market right now because it's not across the board slow or crazy busy,
Yeah. And there's an emotional piece to this too. When it comes to buying a home, the seller is going through something for the reason for them to sell their home. The buyer is going through something for the reason for them to move into a home of their own or the next home. And so both parties are coming at this, it's a pretty emotional experience. And sometimes us as realtors and loan officers, we feel like counselors at times, because you're going through a huge life change. But when seller concessions happen, it almost changes the transaction from just, party A to party B to a partnership of the seller helping the buyer offering, their best foot forward, and they're coming together to create the best scenario, So it's almost, if it feels like it's a win for the buyer, it feels like it's a win for the seller. And in this kind of market, everyone's looking to get a win,
That's a huge point because I think traditionally when a buyer asks for the seller to help with some closing costs or pay closing costs, that looks like a weaker offer.
Right.
Potentially like, oh, the buyer doesn't have the money to pay closing costs. That's not necessarily the case. We just closed a loan, a transaction for a single borrower. She bought her first home. She had plenty of money for down payment and closing costs. And she chose to do a down payment assistance loan to keep her cash. And we did some analysis. I loved that example when we did those numbers. And she said, yeah, I just want to hang on to my cash. I'm going to take the down payment assistance. I love it. So I think we've got to look at all these different options. And then when the offers are presented to a seller, presented in a manner that's full transparency to the seller, we're asking for seller concessions because we want to buy down the interest rate to help get a payment that makes it a win-win to buy your home.
And I've seen borrowers, offer above asking with seller concessions and asking for seller concessions back. And that is, so that the borrower saves cash out of pocket.
That's right.
And has that for their family because, as everyone knows that has moved into a home, there are so many costs that come up when you're moving into a home and starting a house over.
You can, absolutely. And so to preserve that cash is a really important thing.
Right.
And we'll help you. I think one of the most important questions we can ask is how much cash would you like to have left over after this closing? Right. So we're not, our job is not to spend all your money.
I like that question.
Yeah. Right.
How much cash do you want left over after we close?
Right. That's good. You're putting the key in the door for the first time. How much cash do you still have in the bank? The answer, we don't want it to be zero.
No.
We want you to have some cash reserves. So we're going to help you structure that loan and that contract with our real estate agent partner in a manner that gets you the best financing.
Yeah.
So I hope this is helpful.
It is. So obviously this brings up all kinds of scenario questions for yourself of what does that look like for my scenario, or hey, I'm a realtor and what does that look like for my listing that's sitting? We would love to hear from you. Feel free to comment. Feel free to contact us directly. And again, like, subscribe, and share to the Landing Podcast. We're here for you.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Bye.